Hey there, my name is Megan and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a spoiler-free review for Sea of Rust by C. Robert Cargill. But before we go ahead and get on into the spoiler-free review, if you are not already subscribed to my channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button, as well as the little bell icon so you can be notified every time I post new bookish content. I post new videos every Saturday and every Wednesday, and sometimes throughout the week. Also, don't forget to check down in the description box for links to all of my social media, including my Buddy Read Discord and my Patreon. It's been 30 years since the apocalypse, and 15 years since the murder of the last human being at the hands of robots. Humankind is extinct. Every man, woman, and child has been liquidated by a global uprising devised by the very machines humans designed and built to serve them. Most of the world is controlled by an OWI, One World Intelligence, the shared consciousness of millions of robots uploaded into one huge mainframe brain. But not all robots are willing to cede their individuality for the sake of a greater, stronger, higher power. These resistors are outcasts, solo machines wandering among various underground outposts who have formed into an unruly civilization of rogue AIs in the wasteland that was once our world. One of these is Brittle, a scavenger robot trying to keep a deteriorating mind and body functional in a world that has lost all meaning. Although unable to experience emotions like a human, Brittle is haunted by the terrible crimes the robot population perpetrated on humanity. The loner machine roams the Sea of Rust, a 200-mile stretch of desert once known as the Upper Rust Belt, now nothing more than a graveyard where machines go to die. Littered with rusting monoliths, shattered cities, and crumbling palaces of industry, it is the place where the first strike happened. In this swath of desolation, a terrifying wilderness littered with the wreckage of the dead, Brittle slowly comes to terms with the horrifyingly raw and vivid memories of annihilation and nearly unbeatable guilt. The way that I structure my reviews is I talk about the world, the characters, the things that I like, and the things that I didn't like, and then I give the book an overall rating. I'll go ahead and put timestamps down below if you're interested in just skipping to a particular section. In this world, we are in a post-apocalyptic setting. Before the apocalypse, there were bots, androids that were imbued with artificial intelligence, and they were part of our society. They did all of like the labor jobs and menial jobs. And then we had these huge, massive mainframe computers that were described as being as big as like skyscrapers. So artificial intelligence was a huge part of our world. And eventually they took over the world and a war ensued between humans and the machines won. So humans are 100% extinct. So now we are following a world that is controlled by something known as the One World Intelligence, which tries to get all of the AIs into kind of like this hive mind situation to upload their consciousness to this mainframe computer because this mainframe computer basically wants to become all-knowing and wants to become God, essentially. But not all AIs and not all robots want to become part of this mainframe computer, so they are trying to thwart them, and in the process are being chased by this OWI. We follow a character named Brittle, and the story is told from Brittle's point of view. She was a companion AI, which means that she basically saw to people's needs when they were elderly or dying, and she was there to be a companion. Now, in order to survive, Brittle is a poacher, so she goes around looking for parts, other android parts to either sell or use for herself if her parts start going bad. We follow Brittle at first as she is in the Sea of Rust, which is kind of like the Ohio, Michigan area of the United States, and it's just described as, you know, the crumbling remnants of humanity are there, and that's where robots go to die, and that is where we are first introduced to our story and Brittle. Now I'm going to talk about the characters, and really, there's not a lot to say about the characters. So this review is going to be a little bit difficult based on how the story was written and my thoughts about the story. So the only character that I can really talk about is Brittle because we are following her story. And she is an AI, but at the same time, you don't really realize that she's an AI. Like her thought process, her reasoning, everything is so human that there is really an inability to differentiate between her being a robot and her being a human. In fact, Brittle was even suffering from post traumatic stress disorder. For example, something happened between her and her previous owner that she was dealing with. She did horrible things during the war with the humans. There are flashbacks to Brittle killing people during the war, talking about, using a flamethrower to kill children. And she is constantly throughout the book ruminating on what she did and why she did it. So we do see that Brittle is dealing with a lot of flashbacks, a lot of PTSD, and a lot of guilt as she's trying to come to terms with what she was told about the OWI and robots, what she's experienced, and then what she learns in the book. So I will say that Brittle does have a decent character arc. It's definitely not the best one I've read, but there is one, and she does learn things as she goes along. I personally did not feel any connection whatsoever to Brittle as a character. I felt that she was just extremely generic and extremely bland. We did have some other side characters, but once again, they were just bland. They were just side characters. None of them really had any distinct, overwhelming personality. None of them were memorable. There was even one side character that was so relevant to the plot. Like without her, we couldn't even have the plot the way that it was. And I just felt absolutely nothing towards her. The characters, in my personal opinion, were not well done. Now I'm going to be talking about the things that I liked. So overall, I did like the world building of this book. I felt like the fact that our author kind of jumped back to explain the history of how things occurred and how they led up to the current world was really interesting. I've watched some other reviews and read some reviews, and a lot of people said it felt info dumpy. I personally enjoyed that because I thought that our author crafted a very believable, real story, and something that we as humans are obviously in fear of because we are creating technology and it's advancing. And even if you go back to the 80s when, we had the Terminator and Skynet, I mean, this has been like a real fear of humanity since that time. So I really liked how our author kind of expounded on that concept and made it into a story and made it very believable and accessible to the reader. So other than that, there really wasn't much I liked about this book. Everything else is going to be negatives and things that I didn't like. But some things that I don't like in a book, you might like in a book. So it might be a negative for me, but it might be a positive for you. So all of these things are kind of going to go together. And I'm nitpicking because I feel like if one of these things had been changed, then my opinion on the book would have been changed. So first off, while I liked the world building and I liked the story, I felt like it was incredibly generic. But at the same time, if you're just getting into science fiction and you read this, you won't have any trouble understanding it. It just, to me personally, I found the story way too simplistic and a bit recycled. Like I just mentioned Skynet. Like this is something that we have seen before in movies and heard before. And that's anything in literature also because ideas are recycled, but I just felt like if you are going to recycle an idea, put your own spin on it. Try and make it a little bit different, and I did not get anything really unique from this story. Next, like I already mentioned, was the lack of interesting characters. Like the side characters could have been developed. Our main character could have had so much more depth to her because she did have a backstory. We were in her head the whole time, and I just did not feel any connection to her as a character, her emotions, what she was going through. There was just a huge disconnect between me and our protagonist. Next would be the writing style. The writing style wasn't horrible. The writing style wasn't choppy. It wasn't hard to read, but at the same time, like it wasn't pretty at all. I can forgive some things in a book if other things make up for it. So I can slightly forgive bland characters. I can slightly forgive a simple story if you have beautiful prose. I own, for example, The Star-Touched Queen by Roshani Chokski. That is beautiful prose, but the story's like meh. So that's why I keep the book because there's something about the book that I liked. In this, like, even the prose didn't make up for all of the other things that were missing, unfortunately. I've also heard that this book is described as like a robot western, and when I went into this, I had never heard that, but when I was watching some reviews, I heard someone describe it as that, and going back, I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. So a lot of this book is the robots shooting at each other, trying to kill one another. The OWI is trying to capture and kill and whatever with all of these robots. So there are a lot of like shoot 'em up scenes, a lot of action scenes. And I think that our author is a screenwriter. And when I was reading, especially like towards the end of the book, when like the big blowout scene happens, I was like, this is a movie scene. Like it played out like a shoot 'em up Western movie scene. But if you're reading it in the book, it translated fine, but I just feel like if you're gonna have awesome action scenes, like your whole book can't be awesome action scenes. Like you need to have more in order to make the book well rounded. So there are definitely some good action scenes in here, but I just would have liked it to be the story to be just more than that. And finally, the thing that I didn't like was the inability that I had as the reader to differentiate between the robot protagonist and a human protagonist. So, this is just my personal opinion. I don't care how advanced we get as a civilization. I don't think we will ever be able to create a robot or an AI that is exactly like a human. We are organic beings. We make stupid decisions. We're reckless. We're irrational. Yes, our behaviors do have patterns, but at the same time, we can make a decision that just has makes no sense considering the circumstances. So I just feel like no computer will ever be able to mimic that. And I had a lot of trouble following Brittle because I was like, okay, she's thinking like a human, she's acting like a human, she's having these emotions like a human. And it just never connected with me. Like, I was never able to reconcile the fact that she was a robot. So, the whole idea is that humanity is extinct and that these robots have taken over. And I just would have liked more differentiation with regards to how the AIs are different than humans, not how they are the same. All in all, Sea of Rust was a book that I had high hopes for, and unfortunately, it just did not mesh with me as a reader. There are a ton of people out there that really love this book. They gave it 5 stars. They really enjoyed it. I watched one review, and the gentleman was like, "This is my favorite book of the year." It just didn't connect with me personally, and I ended up giving it a 2 out of 5 stars. I did finish it, and there are things I liked about it, such as the world building and the concept of AIs taking over, but I feel like the execution just left me wanting so much more. Okay, you guys, that is it for my spoiler free review of Sea of Rust by C. Robert Cargill. Let me know in the comments if you have read this book and what you thought of it, and I will see y'all soon in another video. Goodbye.